All right, can everybody see my screen?
Sure can.
Okay, perfect. So if you can see my screen, this is the interface of X-1 FBO. And we've made it very easy for our users to find where their pricing is. It's just a menu here called pricing. So when you click on that pricing, you have the sub menu. So if what you're doing is you are setting up your fuel weeks price, all you're going to do is come into your fuel weeks price here. And so one of the things we like to talk about when we get new clients or onboarding, when we're setting all this stuff up, is we really like to understand how your prices are being broken down by your fuel supplier. Because what we're going to do is we're going to try and take out all the questions, that all the ambiguity that might be had in between that fuel price from the fuel supplier to the FBO's price to the end user price. We want to set this up to the T. And so, you know, on our onboarding team, they spend a lot of time trying to understand, and I wouldn't say a lot of time, it's sometimes it's easier than not, depending on what state you live in, especially if you live in California. Sometimes it's very quick and easy, sometimes it's not, but it's very important for not only us on our team and onboarding, that setting up your software or point of sale system, but for you yourself to understand what fuel price you're getting from your fuel supplier. I think that, you know, we either get clients that, you know, they know exactly what they're being charged, down to their cost taxes, down to any type of additional transportation fees, and they know why they're being charged that. But we do find, you know, more often than we would think, is we come to find some FBOs that they're getting a cost from a fuel supplier, but sometimes they don't even necessarily know why they're being cost that, or why they're being taxed that. And, you know, it is important to understand what that is. Right, Jen? I mean, if we're looking at a price breakdown from a fuel supplier, I'm sure you've gotten that too, where you're like, you know, they charge us that, but we don't really know why they charge us that. Or sometimes they charge us that if this happens, sometimes they charge us that if that happens. And sometimes they're not really sure what those variables are. So I think it is important to understand what your fuel prices are. Do you come across that a lot, Jen, where sometimes people just won't know why they're being charged what they're being charged from their fuel supplier?
Definitely. And just during the onboarding process in general, you know, we talk a lot about just the ins and the outs of your FBO, every single thing that makes your FBO unique, and fuel pricing, and going over cost taxes and tax on tax situations and flowage fees. And, you know, it really does shine a light for the vast majority of FBOs on things that maybe they've never thought about before, or maybe they just haven't reviewed in several years. And so, yeah, going through and being able to put all of these details into X1 in one easy to find, easy to read place really is beneficial to the FBO, because they're able to see things that, again, they really don't have an eye on a day-to-day basis, but now they do.
Yeah, definitely. And, you know, one thing that we find a lot is the famous Excel spreadsheet, right? So, you know, we come across these really respectable organizations that, you know, for every piece of their organization, they are a very professional, organized, you know, institution. But when it comes down to you know, what location's doing what fuel pricing, what location's doing this, you know, it goes back down to that Excel spreadsheet that maybe one accountant or a team of accountants made. And, you know, those team of accountants understand the Excel spreadsheet. But when it gets to like the individual level of the GMs at each location, or the CSMs that are putting in, or responsible for putting in that weekly pricing, you know, we get to them, we're like, oh, hey, do you know how this is broken down so we could set up the taxes? And, oh, we don't really know. We just know we have to put this number in this field here of this Excel. And so then we have to find out, okay, what is that formula for? Okay, they're taking this formula, they're adding this and that. So, you guys, it can get very convoluted. And so what we wanted to really go into is we don't want to bore you guys half to death with, sales taxes, taxing on top of just one cost tax, and then not having the rest of those cost taxes. We don't want to bore you about going into a scenario like that, but we just want to show you how X1 can do that. So what you're looking at on my screen is that weekly fuel pricing. So your fuel supplier, they just sent you your next week's fuel price, either that Sunday or that Monday afternoon. In X1, what you're going to do is you're going to come in here to your weekly fuel price. You're going to take that fuel type. You're going to go ahead and hit schedule. And so some systems already have the ability to schedule ahead of time. Some of them don't. But we thought that this was really important to be able to give our users the ability to set their fuel prices ahead of time. So what you're going to do here is just going to add a new price. You're going to put your start date and your time. So you could do it Tuesday right at 1 in the morning or at any time. So we want to take that stress out of those Tuesday mornings for either your accountants on site to have to put in these fuel prices, and give them the opportunity to do this as much in advance as they can. Here you have broken down your cost taxes. And so with our pricing, I'm going to go through each of our fields here. So we do in X1 is we back out of taxes. And, when we first started X1, we weren't doing this type of price breakdown, but we did our homework. We, studied and researched, and we pulled, we took a look at the majority of accounting systems across the world are doing line by line tax, and they're backing out of taxes. So we restructured our pricing very early on, because what we were finding is that, if you take the invoice total, subtotal, and then tax on top of that, it may work in some situations, but it may not always work, because you have those fuel suppliers that will either round up or round down pennies, and there's always going to be some differences. So the more exact we can be to the T on every field of pricing that you are getting priced from your fuel supplier, that's what we want. We want to take the ambiguity out of here. So for example, what you see here is we have the breakdown of your fuel week's price. So starting from the end, our retail price, this is the price that you're going to give out the door to your customer. So in this demo environment, they are charging 5.47 out the door. If you round it up on an invoice, it's going to be 5.48, or it'll round down. But here's going to be your retail price. Then we have your sales tax that is going to tax on top of your margin. And if your cost taxes are set to be taxable, we can individually select from those cost taxes which taxes will be taxed with the sales taxes, which taxes will not be taxed with the sales taxes. And then this is your raw cost. So that's going to be the cost that your fuel supplier is charging you for your fuel before the cost taxes, because it's very important for us to know what each of those cost taxes are, because we're going to go ahead and set it up the next one for you. This is kind of in a nutshell what our weekly pricing looks like. Do you guys have any questions? Is there any kind of deeper conversations you want to get into about fuel prices? Because if you don't, I want to go ahead and get into our account pricing and how that looks like and how diverse that can be. Do you have anything you want to add, Jen, on the weekly fuel pricing?
On the weekly fuel pricing, I just want to, so there was a question from Brian Rogers about contract fuel pricing, and his challenge is knowing what the appropriate contract fuel price should be relative to the full retail price. And typically at most FBOs, right, we all know that every FBO is different, but at most FBOs, the contract fuel price is going to be an end of plane, a flat fee on top of your week's price. So in X1, your contract rate would be whatever that end of plane rate is. Say it's $1.25 on top of your week's price. And so Caroline can show us here how we set that up. In X1, again, it's all driven off of these price rules. So we're able to create these price rules that say, when it is Jet A and the payment methods are these contract fuels, these are the tiers and the rates that are associated with each of those tiers. And again, we have it in this example here. It is all based on our week's cost plus those end of plane rates. So again, that is how most FBOs do it. We do run into those one-off scenarios where we have to get a little bit more complex, and we're absolutely able to do that as well. But again, this is how most FBOs do it. So Brian, I hope that helps answer your question there.
And I'll since we got that question, I'll go into that question for pricing. So Brian or anyone else on this call is curious to know, yeah, how exactly that looks, and you set it up from start to end. Is the first thing we do is we try and understand your taxes. Once we understand your cost taxes and your sales taxes, and we've put that into the system, you know, the state sales tax is this, their cost tax is that, then we'll go ahead and we set up your into-plane rates, like Jen said. So what we have here is we have this menu. It's called exceptions. So these are going to be where you set up all your automated pricing, whether it's for fuel, whether it's for customers, whether it's for ramp hangar, for aircraft overnight. This is the section where you set up all your automated prices. So nobody knows the prices better than, say, the managers on site or those accountants on site. So all they have to do is set it up the one time, and everything else will automate itself. And we'll show you what that looks like. So in payment methods, if it is a price rule based on a payment method, which in the case of contract fuel is going to be the payment method, we're going to do just that. We're going to create a new rule, and we're going to say that this rule applies to one of these three. It either applies to all items that you invoice. It applies to specific item categories. So you can say all of fuel. For all of fuel, jet A, gas, we want to do this kind of pricing. Or you can be specific about the product or item on your invoice. So typically with the contract fuel scenario, we would select that first option, product and service. We would either say equal or different too. But when the product or service is equal to jet A, this means that anytime a CSR or a user selects the item jet A on an invoice, the bottom is going to apply. So we did our first line here. Whenever the product or service is equal to jet A, I'm going to give it a name. So let's just call this my contract fuel into-plane. Into-plane rates. And these can be your into-plane rates, maybe just for that year, maybe just for that season, or however long you negotiate those terms for. We're going to set a priority to it, whether we want it high or low. In the case of contract fuel, typically you want it to be high, because when they switch that payment method over to contract fuel, then this needs to take priority. So we're going to leave it on medium or high, and we're going to give it a start and a to date. In the case that there is no end of term negotiation, or you kind of just want to leave it indefinite, you don't have to put in an end date there. You could just leave it open, and that will allow the price to just keep on being active indefinitely. But you will have to do a start date. And so this also allows the opportunity to set the automated pricing up ahead of time. So you're coming to the end of the year, you're coming to the end of the quarter, you're changing fuel suppliers, whatever the case may be. You started getting a new operator, so now you're using a different contract fuel that you're not used to using. You know, you're going to know those terms well ahead of time before that first aircraft lands at your FBO. You'll get the opportunity to come in here and say, okay, next week on the first, let's say September, right? We're going to have a new operator of a new contract fuel payment type start to appear at our front desk, and we want to make sure that everything is set up. So I'm going to start it on that date. You can start the hour in the middle of the night or at 8 in the morning, and then you're just going to add your conditions here. So with the conditions here, we have a lot of different conditions that you can layer on top of each other. But we'll go ahead and select contract fuel equal to, and in that case, you'll just select the payment method, whatever contract fuel that is. So let's just say, for the sake of this example, Everest Fuel Management is the new contract fuel that we're going to start to see at our FBO. I'm going to select Everest Fuel Management, and I'm going to come down to this section that says price computation. And I'm sorry if this looks a little zoomed out. Let me zoom in for you guys. I'm going to just go ahead and select how that price is broken down. So if it is a week's cost, so if it's a week's cost in the into-plane, so whatever the week's cost is plus $1.50 or $1, $1.25 or $2, or depending on the tier, we'll go ahead and select week's cost, or you could also do retail minus. So in the common scenarios, we typically see a week's cost plus or a retail minus. So I'll just go ahead and use week's cost as the example. So now I have selected week's cost. whenever my quantity is, let's say, from 1 to 500, it is going to be week's cost plus, and we'll just start with $2 of margin. And then I'll add my other tier. So let's say 501 to 1001. That's going to be week's cost plus, typically goes down $1.75, right? And then so on and so forth. You guys get the idea here. We'll do an invoice example here so you can see how that looks. And then if, let's say I have another contract fuel company that now I've negotiated the same type of tier or into plane rate with, I could just come back into this same rule and I can just hit add here. So it's going to be whenever that user selects either Everest fuel, or we can also do AEG fuels, they are going to receive the tier margins below. Okay, now I've created my rule. My rule is enabled. I'm going to go ahead and create an invoice here so you guys can see what that looks like. All right. Okay, so I'm going over to our invoicing screen in X-1. And I'm going to select new invoice here. Okay, and I'm just going to type in a tail number. Cool Cats Aviation. Currently, I still haven't told the invoice, how this customer is going to pay. So you'll see that the first prices that come up on the screen are going to be that retail price that has been established for that fuel week's price. Now that I have my Jet A line in there, you would put the quantity of fuel, or you would typically have a fuel ticket attached already. So let's just say 200. And we're still showing at an out the door price of retail. Now, the moment we switch this over to, how are they paying, Everest Fuels or AEG? Well, let's select Everest Fuels. It's going to create a new invoice for me with that contract. And now the new tiers are going to take place. Let's see here. Oh, they didn't. Hold on one second. Let me see why it did not pop up. Oh, I know why. So sometimes I do these things and I forget. I put a start date. If you guys remember, I put a start date of September 1st. So the system is doing what I told it to do. It is not putting that new price in because it is not September 1st yet. So let me just go ahead and change that September 1st date to today so you guys can see what that looks like. Okay, so now I'm back to the rule. Let me change that from date when it starts to today. Perfect. Let me go ahead and hit save. And let's just go back to that invoice. All right, I'm going to create a new invoice. I'm going to put November 305, Charlie Mike. All right, I'm going to type in Jet A. Let's put that first here, so within the 200-gallon range. Okay, now I'm going to move it over to Everest Fuels. All right, and now we have that price rule taking into effect. So if you click on the drop downs here, you'll see the price breakdown, and you'll also see inside the info button, you'll be able to see that this pricing is being taken from the automated pricing rule that's called contract fuel ITP rates, which is the ones that we have just set up. And then if I change that tier, it should automatically change for me. So I'm going to the 600-gallon quantity. Now we have that price change. It went from 4.23 to 4.16. I didn't get a chance to see any questions, but let me know if there's any other questions that you want to go over here. I can mute my computer to see if maybe it's my end.
Are we having some audio issues? All right, looks like we've got a new poll up. Looks like the answers are starting to come in on that. This one's always a hot topic, billing errors.
Billing errors.
Yes, So the poll question, for those of you who are on the call, you should be able to find the polls and give us an answer to: do you find your FBO have many billing errors regarding fuel pricing, or just even pricing errors in general? Maybe, what's for services.
While they answer that, I'm going to answer a question that Barbara had here. So Barbara, whether an invoice is in a working status, whether it has already been completed, you can always go into any invoice in X-1, and this specific price that you're inquiring about, the one you want to confirm if it's taking from the correct price rule, is you're going to find the line of the invoice. In this case, we only have one line in this invoice, and there is a little info button here. So if you see my mouse, it's hovering over this little info button. When you click on that, it pops up a screen. This screen, we created this screen to show the exact breakdown of how you're getting to that price. Again, so that there is no ambiguity here. You have how much of this price is a taxable amount, how much of this is going to be cost taxes, how much of it is the margin. So you're going to have a lot of information here on how you got to that price. And then if you scroll down here, it says price rules. So it'll always show you if a price on an invoice took from an automated price rule, you will see information down here below as to what price rule it took from. If it did not take from any price rule, the section will show here price rules, but there won't be anything listed underneath. So that would tell you that there's no price rules being taken into effect. Versus here, we see that it says price rules of payment method, and then the name of it is contract fuel into plane. So if I wasn't too sure, if I saw an invoice and I wasn't like, where did they get that price from? I come into the info, I come in here, I see the rule description, then I just, okay, contract fuel into planes. Then I go to my my list of my automated pricing and I search for the one with the description that says contract fuel into plane. You're welcome. Pricing is fun. Pricing is fun.
And every FBO is so different in how they do their pricing.
Yes, and don't know if we have. So we have.
I'm really envious of FBOs that say that they have no pricing issues with their billing. That's wonderful.
It could be for a number of reasons. Either they know their clients that well, right? Some FBOs do know their clients very well. It's rare that they get like transients, and if they do get a transient, then it's just whatever's out the door. But especially at FBOs that see a lot of transient traffic, it's hard to keep up with all the negotiated prices for sure. So I see some questions here before I go into the more specific kind of price calculations that we could do. Let me go to the first poll question. It says, do you find many errors? Those are the ones that you were reading now, Jen, right? All right. So Alexa says, not many, but some. Okay. Darita Hernandez says no. We had an issue with the holiday. The pricing should have gone into effect on the 5th of July, but it did not generate the way it was supposed to, even though the holiday was the day before. And that might have been an issue maybe in our internal system. I don't know if that was a time zone issue or not. But I think I remember what issue you were talking about, Carrie. And I know that whatever the issue was, we did solve it because we did come up with a fix for it. Let's see. Roman Mendez. Most common issues we experience are at the front desk. Okay. Yeah, accounting catches quite a few billing issues each month. Correcting these can be time consuming, correct? Yeah. Yeah. Cassandra, no, just always the panic of raising or lowering fuel prices based on the load and needing to change the price based on the load in the market. That's a good response, Cassandra. We can talk about that. Actually, if we want, there's other people on this call that can probably chime in as well. There are some FBOs that change their prices every time they get a new load. And I guess the purpose behind that would be to just stay with some current pricing. I imagine, Cassandra, that you're in a FBO that has maybe a lower fuel volume where you're able to kind of keep up with the fuel loads, and maybe it's getting to a point where it's harder to keep up with the fuel loads because whoever's in charge of putting that rate is not necessarily there at the time that a new fuel load comes in. So you're probably having to play a lot of catch up. I'm just guessing here. I'm assuming. And yeah, the market and what your out the door should be. But Cassandra, are you really changing your week's price just every time you guys get a load, and then you kind of just keep an eye on when the inventory goes down, and when you order a new load, you're updating that fuel price? Is that what you're doing at your FBO? If you are, I'd be really curious to know.
She says yes. Okay. in the chats.
Okay, copy. Is there? I'm not sure what your fuel provider is, Cassandra, but you know, I guess one of my comment would just be if you're able to negotiate a weekly price with your fuel rep at your fuel supplier, that's how the majority of what we see, at least across the industry. Typically, FBOs do not have the time to catch up and be behind and change the prices every time they get a new load. So typically what a lot of fuel suppliers do is they'll negotiate a week's rate with that client, the FBO, and then that'll be the set price that you give on your invoices out to your customer from that Tuesday to that following Monday. And it could be a way to maybe stay a little bit more accurate with what you're dealing with there. If there's reasons you can't do that, I'm sure there might be, but if I were you, I would probably look into that to seeing if they can change it from a fuel load price to a weekly price. And you may be gaining some money by changing the price every time you get a new fuel load. You may be losing some, and it's the same thing with the weekly prices. I think in terms of chasing like fractions of pennies, it's kind of hard. I think for peace of mind and for invoice corrections and things like that, to me, I find the weekly pricing a better go than the every fuel load type pricing, just because of what you just said. Just having to change that price every week, or having to be playing catch up with all of your fuel loads seems like it can get stressful at times, especially if you start getting more busier than you anticipated. All right, so thank you guys for submitting that.
I just want to pop in real quick, and Cassandra put in the notes that she would like to request a follow-up meeting with us more about this after the webinar. So Cassandra will definitely reach out.
Absolutely, yeah, for sure, Cassandra. Well, we can talk about fuel prices all day for sure. All right. So the next question was, how do you currently communicate new price rates with your POS system? Log it into the system and update fuel prices. Jeffrey Craig Excel. Carrie said we actually had a department that does that for us, a controller. Perfect. Weekly discussions amongst leadership. It's updated manually every Tuesday. Notification warning boxes that appear upon the invoice. Okay. Management updates pricing on AvPOS and QuickBooks. Update website tenant. Yeah, there's a lot of things to update on that Tuesday, especially with the websites and the marketing sites. All right, weekly updates email that are loaded in their system. Signs at pumps, updates on weekly. Okay. So, and the reason we ask that is we just generally we're curious to know how most FBOs are doing it. We have an idea from what we see with our customers, but we also just are curious to know everybody on this call that may or may not be our customer, because we are a technology solution, and a lot of what we build is coming directly from a direct demand from the industry. Again, whether it be customers that we have, customers that we're getting that are coming off of different softwares, maybe customers in different, in other countries that just do fueling completely different if they do have fueling. And so we're always trying to look to make a technology solution that is open enough to solve for each of whatever that FBO has going on. And so that really some of these questions are to answer some questions, and some are just for our own curiosity. All right. How does your FBO staff know what clients get with discount? Robert, hopefully our automated pricing set up and his work. It's too much for each individual to remember. Correct. See it. CRM notes are all negotiated rates. So Roman, I'm assuming you guys don't use X1 FBO. You're using some kind of CRM. Curious to know if the CRM you're using is aviation specific, or if it's just or if it is a CRM kind of like a Salesforce or something along those lines that can be used amongst all industries. Because a CRM is a very, very powerful tool as well. And we internally have thought of integrating with different types of CRMs, creating our own CRM. We have our X1 FBO system, which is, very specific for FBO scheduling, ops, invoicing, and field management. But there's definitely a whole side of the CRM and the customer profiles and accounts that, we have a lot of ideas. We have a lot of mockups for. We've had a lot of discussions for, and other CRMs that we personally like that we want to integrate with too. So curious to know what CRM you're using, Roman. If you could put it in the chats, would love to talk more on that and pick your brain. Warning messages, utilizing rule exceptions. Okay, perfect. Field vendor points. We don't offer discounts often, rare occasion. Cassandra, I would love to know where you're at. Yeah, definitely. I want to know what FBO she like, what area of the U.S. she's at. I'm or not the U.S.
South Texas International Airport at KEBG.
Okay.
Kilo Echo.
Okay, cool. I wished I worked at an airport that it was rare where we offered discounts.
We have a few of those FBOs, and yeah, it is always amazing, right? It's like so no discounts? Nope, no discounts. None? Not at all? Okay, great.
And it's great, right? Yeah, like Carrie just said, you either come across businesses that they know their day-to-day customers very well, so you really are not putting any kind of extra burden on your staff to remember. But those are very few and far between. What we find most commonly is we have FBOs with a lot of new hires that are trying to bring them into the aviation industry, whether it's a career or just a job at that moment. They still need them to provide excellent service, and they're also trying to attract business from competitors across the field, or maybe from another FBO that's close by, or another airport that's close by. So offering discounts, like in most FBOs that we go to, it's very rare that anyone even gets the retail price. I would say, I'm just putting numbers out, I would say probably like 9 out of 12 invoices that are done at front desk, and the majority of like our clientele and FBOs we visit are all discounted rates at some kind of level, discounted rates, whether it's with a contract fuel, whether it's an operator rate, whether it's a one-off type of rate. The majority of those invoices are discounted rates. Based on payment method, most pricings are set up in the POS system perfect prior to arrival. Okay. So Scott said, we have a custom fuel file through our program where each location can set up a unique fuel rate for various customers sent weekly. Okay, perfect. And so I don't know if you guys know, we actually did an integration in X1 itself with FBO links. And we've started to set this live at some of our locations. But we did this on purpose because a lot of FBOs do use fueler links or FBO links to publish their prices across to all the operators. And so they already have accounts set up with FBO links, and they may already be using X1. So what we've done is we've created this connection so that whenever you do a pricing inside of X1, whenever you set up your weekly pricing, so our next week's rate, we have a new week's cost now from $229, it went to $230. It will send that pricing to your FBO links account that is already set up. It'll update it automatically. And then, it's one less website that you have to update on that Tuesday when you're busy having to go to all those other systems like AirNav and things like that. So just wanted to let you guys know that if you didn't know that, we do have an FBO integration. And if anybody in this call is interested in finding out more about that integration and it is using X1 and does have an FBO links account, let us know and we'll get you set up on that for sure. Okay. Yeah, I've heard Salesforce is a really good CRM. So can you also distribute price letters through X1, Roman? So Roman, we have this section here called contract price. And so here we have all your contract fuel price rules that you have are going to be in here. There is a print, for example, and an email. So if you needed to email, so let me print it real quick so you can see what it looks like. And there's capability to change this if you need to. But so if you needed to send this pricing, because now you've updated it for that week, if you needed to send this pricing back out to those contract fuel companies or those payment companies, you could either print this or you can email it, which is the same PDF. It's telling you the tier, what the new cost was, what the out the door price is going to be. And if you need to alter any of these boxes that you see here on this PDF, it's something we could set up with you during the onboarding process. If this is something that's going to be important for you to save time, especially, we could put a request to add anything on these boxes if there's something specific. And you would just hit email and send the email to whoever it is at that contract fuel, and they'll get that pricing template. Obviously, this is something between the FBO and that contract fuel company, not necessarily something you'd want to send to your customers. But yeah, we do have the capability to do that if you need to. All right, so I feel like we've talked a lot about just fuel prices in general, but I do, before we get to the end of this call, I do want to touch on just prices in general. Going back to the price rule, it could look like a complicated screen, but once you understand what it does, it's very simple. One of the scenarios I want to leave you guys with before we end this call is how specific you can get with your automated prices. So VIP client. Okay, so there is a lot of, I think Jen has probably seen every kind of pricing scenario you can think of. You would think it would just be as simple as hey, I own this FBO, I run this FBO, you guys are an operator, charter company, you fly in, come with us, we'll give you $1.50 whenever your aircraft from your fleet come in, right? That's the most basic scenario, where all we need to know in the FBO is the name of your company and the tail numbers that belong to your fleet, and then we could set you up with a price, right? That would be the most basic scenario that you could do. What we've come to find is that there are a lot of different types of one-off scenarios that we find, especially when we're setting up this onboarding, where it's not just that charter company coming into your FBO with their fleet. It's that charter company when it's just one tail number of that fleet, or just these three tail numbers of that fleet, because that's part of the management fractional timeshare for the owner that we negotiated, and the rest of the charter operator, they have different owners. So we only want to apply this discount to these three owners with these three aircrafts. And maybe sometimes they fly maybe sometimes they fly like angel flights. And so whenever it's an angel flight, we don't, even though we have the special rate, they can't get that special rate when they're flying an angel flight because we're going to waive some fees and stuff like that. So with all of those kinds of different scenarios and conditions, we have here our conditions. And so you can add conditions on top of conditions, and you can get very, very specific about your pricing. And this will help you negotiate things too. So let's say that you have a negotiation with a customer. So I'm going to select a customer. We'll do the Cool Cats again. So whenever Cool Cat comes in, right, and they are using, they may have a fleet of 10, but only with this tail number comes to your FBO. And we'll do another condition. And they take a fuel minimum of 200. And they are aircraft flight type. They are flying an angel flight that day versus a charter flight, or vice versa. They're flying a maintenance flight that day versus a charter. So you have very specific conditions here that you can use on top of each other. So let's say whenever they're flying charter, whenever this customer comes in and it's just this tail number, and we've determined that it is a charter flight and they've taken 200, go ahead and give it the price below. You can do this kind of layering of condition on top of layering, and this is what automates the pricing so that you take away that burden from that CSR to have to remember or read notes. Speaking from personal experience, when you have that invoice in front of you, you have a pilot that's just been on 10 legs, he's ready to go home. you know, he just dropped off 10 passengers. He's flying empty now back to his hometown. He just wants to get home. And you have to read a paragraph worth of notes to determine how to create that invoice. Sometimes you have to deal with their frustration, and the quicker you can make it, the less burden you can give your CSRs to remember this or have to read through it. If they just create the invoice, the CSR doesn't even have to do anything. As long as he or she is selecting the correct tail number and company and the fuel minimum, you know, everything else falls into place. There's another thing that we have here that I want to talk about that I know a lot of other systems don't do, and it's the ability to add a product on top of a price rule. And so what that looks like and what that is you may have a scenario where you have maybe an airline negotiation with the current airline on your field, and only when you're invoicing for that airline, you want to do a jet A line, but you also want to do an interplane line, and you also want to add maybe a special kind of upcharge fee. In most systems, you would have to write a note. Remember to add a new item on that invoice for the jet A line, and a new item for the hookup fee, and a new item for this service fee. And that's something that the CSR has to remember. With X1, you can add a product. So if I had set up this price rule right, and whenever that CSR creates that jet A, I also need a new line in that invoice to be, let's say, a service fee or a hookup fee, I can add it here, and the invoice will automatically populate that line as soon as that CSR selects the jet A. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use that add product. We've used it in a lot of cases. We also have options here to do prices before sales taxes, after sales taxes, and maybe you just have a cost for the rest of your clients, but for this one client, they have a different cost because they're military. So we also have the option to treat that. A lot of different ways to set up the X1 pricing here. Jen, is there any weird scenarios that you can think of that come to mind where our pricing has really kind of shined through in your experience from other FBOs where you're like, they wouldn't have been able to do this if they didn't have X1?
Yeah, you know, I when I think of where it really, really shines, I think of parking fees, and I think of landing fees and overnight fees. Just the way that we're able to load all of those types of fees based on however you are charging them, whether it is by individual makes and models of aircraft, or whether it's by categories, you know, your light jets, your medium jets, so on and so forth. However you guys are charging those, we can create very similar pricing rules to automatically pull in those types of fees, which almost more than fuel pricing at some FBOs is a much bigger win for them. Just being able to know that when I type in a tail number that's associated with a citation 10, it is going to pull for me automatically what my landing fee is, what my overnight parking fee is, my hangar fee, my facility fee. All of those fees being driven to every single invoice appropriately is magical to most FBOs.
Definitely. Peace of mind. Peace of mind for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're not familiar, just so you guys know, what Jen mentioned about the aircraft models, you know, we do have aircraft specs embedded into X1 to assist with those pricing fees, especially for those FBOs that have the, you know, county rates. They have to go off of, you know, maximum landing, maximum towing capacity, length of aircraft. We have that all embedded into FBO, and you can do specific pricing off of any of these type of aircraft specs. All right. So we've talked a lot about pricing. We could talk more about pricing. Is there anything that you guys would like us to talk about, whether it's X1 or just prices in general, in this chat or through this workshop? I'll give people some time to answer. Do you have any prices you have to set up today, Jen, with anyone?
I do. I'm going to be working on setup for a handful of FBOs that I've been at over the last few weeks. I've got today and tomorrow to do some setup, and then I'm back on the road doing an initial onboarding visit for an FBO in Arkansas. And I'll be gathering all of their data, everything that makes them special and unique, and then we'll be getting them on the road to being onboarded.
Nice, nice, nice. So you're going to be in these screens quite often here in the next couple days. So Barbara did have a question before we left. Can you please show the best way to add a negotiated discount for a GPU? Absolutely. So negotiated meaning you negotiated something specifically for a customer that that customer, you know, your GPU you sell retail for $50, but just when that customer comes in, they get the GPU at like $25 or they get it waived or something like that, right? So very easy. You would go to the customer profile. You can do this you can get to this from two different ways, but the easiest for me, I would say, is to find the customer profile. So I'll just go into our customer list and type in our customer. In this case, it would be Cool Cats Aviation. Open up that customer profile, right? And then what I do is in our customer profile, scroll all the way down. And there's your section there, pricing rules. Okay, you're going to create a new rule. All right, and because you did it through the customer profile, it automatically gives you that customer profile. And then under product, you would select that specific product. So you would say GPU. Okay, and you can say Cool Cat GPU rate. Okay, and then if it is a fixed price, meaning, you know, out the door, it's always $50, but just for this customer, it's going to be $25. You'll change that price computation to fixed. And if there's no quantity tier, that's fine. You just won't touch that quantity. You'll just go ahead and put in that value of what they would get, $25. Go ahead and save, right? And then I'll go ahead and create an invoice for that customer with a GPU, and we should be able to see that price rule kick in. So I'm going to say 305 Charlie Mike. All right, let's say GPU. Perfect. And the price automatically overrides to 25. And then again, if you click on that info button and you scroll to the bottom, you'll see that it's coming from that rule that we just created. Cool Cat GPU rate 25.
We have a couple more questions also in the questions.
Sure. All right, so let's see. Georgiana Bradbury, what would be the price for the lot created from an inventory adjustment based on the physical inventory? So Georgiana's question is very specific to end of month closing, and that gets into fuel inventory. So just to kind of give you guys an idea, we have, for those of you on this call that aren't familiar with how our fuel inventory works, X-1 has a very robust fuel inventory capability. We have the capability to have your FBO's lots, meaning all the fuel that your FBO owns versus any company-owned inventory. In the case that you pump fuel on behalf of American Airlines or you pump fuel on behalf of this contract fuel company, in order to keep track of those different inventories, we have the ability in X-1 to differentiate which lot goes to what, and it's all real time. So long as when you receive that fuel load, you select the correct owner, everything else will stay that way. So at the end of the month, and Georgiana, please feel free to ask more questions as I'm talking about this. The price at the end of the month when you're doing, or when you're just doing an inventory adjustment. So for most FBOs, when they do an inventory adjustment, so they said, now I have a gain of fuel or I have a loss of fuel of 200, that's either going to send some kind of GL entry to the accounting system, or it's going to book some kind of value, gain or loss of, let's say 300 in that case. At what price is it booking at, right? At what cost is it using in those scenarios, right? That's the question that she's asking. And it depends on how your FBO is set up again. So if your FBO only deals with their own FBO inventory, or in the case that they do deal with their FBO and other owned inventory, it is going to take the lots that still have an available balance, and it is going to book it at the average of those balances of what balances are left, if that makes any sense. So if you have, at the end of the month or whenever you're doing that inventory adjustment, if you have 3 lots left and those lots all have different cost bases, it's going to book it with that average of those 3 lots to your accounting system. How it books it depends on your accounting system, but I think that answered your question. I don't know if that helped answered your question, or if you have any other questions on that, on the FBO physical. Did I say that right, Jen? Does that track on what you think Georgiana was saying?
I believe so, yes. All those unique things.
Christy, or K Rissy Ross says, can X1 update pricing rules based per customer? Oh, yeah. Sorry, I'm reading that wrong. Can X1 update pricing rules per customer based on dates? In other words, a managed customer's contract comes due in 1 year. How can X1 help me remember to update those into plain fee prices? So right now there is 2 things. One, the price rule itself, you can set an expiration date so that it automatically stops at the end of that negotiated price. What we don't have currently in the system that we are building, that is part of one of our update releases, is that we are working on a notifications, not just for this, but for anything. Notifications to the FBO, whether it's an email or a pop-up on the screen that says, and taxes too, actually. We actually are working on developing it right now for taxes. So when you have a tax where the end date is coming up soon, we don't want the FBO to get past that date forgetting that they had a tax that was expired. Same thing with price rules. We don't want the FBO to a week later, oh shoot, that's right, we're supposed to change our taxes the week before. Maybe someone got the notification, maybe someone forgot, maybe they put the end date, but they never put the new rate in. So now it's the day passed, the rule expired, and now there's no taxes being applied, or there's no price rule being applied because someone forgot to put a new one in. So we have in development right now a notification specifically for taxes that we're going to repurpose and use for everything that has an end date, if that makes sense, Chrissy. I don't have something to show you right now because it's still in development, but we definitely do have that in the works for sure. You're welcome. All right. So if there's not any other questions, or if you guys have any other questions that you can think of, we can get very specific about how to set up pricing, how to calculate your pricing. Maybe if you need any help renegotiating, or what we think or recommend is, the best way to set up a certain price, we're more than happy to share. It's not uncommon that we come across FBOs where they ask us, what are most FBOs doing in these kinds of scenarios? How are they kind of treating that? And we kind of use our knowledge that we've gathered from a lot of our customers to kind of share that knowledge. At the end of the day, it is going to be up to you how you want to negotiate those prices with your fuel supplier, with your operators, with your managed clients. So, but if you need our help, or if you have any questions on just specifically what we've seen the industry doing today, we're more than happy to answer those questions for sure. And if anyone on this call has any idea of what is going on in the industry today and how people are negotiating rates, it's going to be Jen Massey on this call for sure. She has seen a lot of it.
But yet I always am able to still be surprised somehow.
And we always find a way to make it happen in X1. Somehow. We always find a way.
Yeah, we do.
All right. Well, it's been a pleasure having everybody on. If this wasn't the kind of content that you guys were thinking about getting in this meeting, if you were thinking maybe this is going to be something more technical into, I don't know, maybe fuel lots or fuel lot pricing, let us know if there's enough demand, if there's enough people here that think that we should be covering different kinds of topics. Let us know, and if this, again, we have this with a market of our current customers, but also people outside of our network. So we want to keep this conversation and discussion open. But if you guys are our current customers and you want more specific trainings for that, or if you want us to kind of do a monthly thing where we just cover certain topics, we're toying around with a lot of ideas of how to do that. So we're happy to hear your thoughts and your feedback on this and how we can improve. And thank you guys for your time on being on this call. Thank you so much. Nice to see a lot of you here on this call that I haven't gotten to speak to in a while. So thanks. Maybe next time we could actually open up the mic and let people speak. That'd be cool.
And to our clients that joined us today, we're also offering X1 Approach in-person training. So those are great for the locations that have been with us for a long time. And if you're new to X1, we can provide a private demonstration. And please keep in touch with us at X1 FBO on social media. And we also have a community page, x1fbo.com, that you can participate in our share stories, stay in touch, and participate in our contests. Just wanted to add that. I dropped in my information in case you guys want to set up one-on-ones too.
Oh, one last thing. If any of you on this call feel like you have topics that you would like to discuss and maybe share with a network outside of X1 customers, this is a perfect platform. So we have in previous workshops, we've gotten some requests for current customers that we know have a lot of knowledge in a certain subject. And we would love to have a co-host from one of our clients or maybe one of our soon-to-be clients that has a very specific knowledge on a specific subject and can help a lot of this network of people understand a little bit more about the industry. So please let us know if you're interested in being up here on these workshops. Just let us know. I'm sure Monica would be happy to hear from you.
Definitely. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week.
Yes, have a good one.
Thanks
Happy Monday.
Bye.